Here's an example illustrating how Bayesian belief networks offer such a good representation of us as humans. The topic here is the sport of hang gliding, which is considered a somewhat dangerous sport. We will use this Bayesian belief network model to better understand how hang gliding accidents happen. And from that, perhaps be able to learn how to reduce them. We have had our hang gliding club for 10 years, but recently we've had a number of accidents where people were hurt. This worries us, and the management of the club is trying to understand why these accidents happen, and whether we can find a way to prevent them. This video, which is the first of two, will cover this part of the story. A few pilots are behaving a little less responsibly than others. This is especially true of Boaz, who has also been warned a few times. Some members even prefer that he be given a notice to leave the club. So a members' meeting is scheduled to discuss, among others, Boaz's future in the club. Part 2 of this series will cover this decision section of our story. The percentage of accidents in hang gliding and paragliding is much higher than that of general aviation. It is estimated that the number of accidents per 100,000 hours is around 10 fatal and 20 serious ones. The remaining 99.97% of flights end without an accident or with only minor accidents, for which there is no data. There are two almost exclusive causes of accidents. The first is pilot error or misjudgment. The second one is equipment failure. In most cases, the latter is also related back to the pilot, who probably made a mistake when preparing his or her equipment for the flight. There are also a few cases each year where hang glider pilots forget to attach their harnesses, which in most cases is a fatal injury. Here we already see a fully constructed Bayesian belief network. We put it together using Norsys Software Corporation's Netica package. The network was constructed as a directed acyclic graph, DAG, with the help of veteran hang gliding pilots and some material from the literature. The top node shows the prevalence of accidents, or the prior in our analysis. The probabilities of the different states belonging to the other nodes of the network have not yet been entered, so the numbers are the default 100%, divided by the number of states in each node. The second row of nodes shows the main problem parameters, starting on the left with the pilot's personality. For the sake of simplicity, the pilot is defined here as either responsible, or less responsible, and anywhere between the two. Moving to the right, we have a node: the pilot's natural talent for flying, his or her accumulated flying experience, and last but not least, how current is our pilot, namely how long has it been since this pilot last flew a hang glider. The node flight challenge level on the third row gives a feel for the effort level that day. This is influenced among others by the pilot's experience, because less experienced pilots would find any conditions more challenging, and to some extent also on the pilot's personality, and some other considerations such as other hang gliders close by, flying close to terrain or bad weather, all of which affect the challenge level for that pilot. Note that the likelihood of the various states in the circumstances node on fourth row is not entirely objective, because it's also influenced by how often our pilot is flying in bad weather, not keeping a safe distance from terrain or getting too close to other gliders. Equipment failure, which is to the right of circumstances, is almost always caused by either a hurried assembly of the glider or improper care of the emergency parachute. Bad weather such as gusty winds could be a contributing factor. The bottom node provides us with the parameter we are most interested in: what is the probability of an accident considering the conditions described by the network. So now we have a basic model of our problem space, put together by experienced hang glider pilots, plus information from hang gliding safety reviews. Note that the building blocks for this network were the main parameters of our problem space, and a set of causal links that reflect the influence of these parameters on one another. What remains now is to give some values to the probabilities that each state in each of the nodes will come into effect, conditional on the causal effect of other linked nodes, having their own states and probabilities. Now, sometimes there's no data to base our assumptions on. In such cases, it is customary to have experts in the field provide their best estimates. However, most Bayesian belief networks model a world for which there is some past experience. That could be, for example, medical histories in case of a healthcare-related networks, past engineering design concepts, or as in our case, reports of previous flight experiences. Netica, and all other packages that help construct Bayesian belief networks, have the ability to learn from data and figure out on their own, based on the experience expressed in the data, the probabilities of events occurring in the problem space. For that, Netica and the other packages rely on standard machine learning tools such as gradient descent and others. Unlike neural networks, however, which normally require thousands and sometimes millions of examples to begin forming a picture of the problem space, Bayesian belief networks need no more than a handful of cases. This obviously makes them the perfect choice in situations where there's limited, uncertain, or even partially missing information. Here's how it's done in practice on Netica. We first highlight those nodes that we want the system to inhabit with the results from its classification of the data we will provide. Note that the prevalence information is already defined, so this node is not highlighted. Then, we access Netica's drop-down menu under Cases, enabling us to load a table such as the one shown here. In this table, each column corresponds to a parameter, which is, as we recall, a node in the network. The states of each node in the network are mentioned here under each parameter, by the same name that is used to describe that state in that node. All that remains is for the system to perform its classification of the data in the table. The results of that machine learning effort are displayed inside each of the nodes in the network. The learning part is done, and our network has now come to life. Now is the time to enter an important phase in the construction of Bayesian belief networks: verification and validation of the model. One way to do this is to drive the network into extreme situations and see how it behaves. For example, we can change the probability of an accident to 100%. This is easily done in Netica with a mouse click on the node accident. But before we do that, notice the probability that the average pilot has a responsible personality, 82.5%. Why average pilot? Because this number reflects the learned experience of the network from all the cases we supplied it with, and that includes flights by all members of the club. Let us copy for reference the current probabilities next to each node. So let's now assume that there was an accident. The network now indicates what it believes could have been the cause of that accident. First, we notice that the belief in the pilot being a responsible person has been eroded somewhat, from 82.5 down to 71.8%. Other probabilities have also changed. For example, the belief that the pilot had only a 10.8% probability for low experience has more than doubled to 27.3%. If you now look at the network's belief that there was an equipment failure involved, you find only a 24.7% probability that this is true. However, if we now tell the network that we are 100% certain our pilot had high talent for flying, considerable experience, and has flown recently, the belief that equipment failure might have been the cause of the accident has gone up almost threefold to 67.8%. This is also partly due to a corresponding belief that the circumstances were nominal at 67.0%. But if we now enforce an additional constraint that the weather was bad, the network's own belief, based on the remaining active nodes, is to even further reinforce the probability that there must have been an equipment failure. But how does the network know all of that? Let us recall that to begin with, we relied on experts in the field of hang gliding to define the main parameters affecting safety. Then, causal links were added, again by our experts, to reflect which parameters are affected by others. So even before learning from the data, the network already had considerable knowledge on its own. The second stage involved additional learning where a select number of previous flights, some ending in accidents and some not, were fed to the system, flight histories from which it established, using common machine learning techniques, the quantitative proportions by which parameters seem to affect each other, while guided by the causal links defined by the experts. So we can see that Bayesian belief networks are really a collaborative man-machine effort, which is what gives them so much depth and power over other software tools that learn through simple pattern matching. Here we end part 1. In the second part we will turn our belief network into a decision network, conduct our members' meeting and reach a decision regarding our not-so-responsible pilot named Boaz.